Welcome to our deep dive into Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. This is going to be fun. You guys sent over a ton of trivia questions and quotes, even some in Thiel's own words that, well, let's just say might stir up some debate.
Yeah, it's a cool way to approach the book. I mean, we're not just hitting the main points. We're using these snippets to jump into Thiel's whole philosophy.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so before we get lost in trivia, could you maybe give us the rundown on what 0 to 1 is all about?
Basically, it's Thiel's view on progress, right?
Yeah.
He says real progress means making something totally new, 0 to 1, and that it all comes down to tech innovation. He contrasts this with what he calls horizontal progress, which is basically globalization, just copying what already works.
Okay, so think like inventing the first car
Exactly.
versus just making more of the same car in another factory.
Exactly.
Got it. But the excerpts also talk about Thiel's, some might say controversial, stance on competition, right?
Right. He thinks competition actually stifles innovation. He has this famous quote, capitalism and competition are opposites. And that kind of lays the foundation for how he thinks about building successful companies.
Okay, wow, that's a bold statement. I mean, we always hear how competition pushes things forward, brings prices down, all that. Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. So Thiel's argument is that when companies are constantly fighting for market share, in a crowded space, they just end up focusing on small improvements and short-term profits.
Yeah.
Instead of going after those big, risky innovations that could lead to huge change, he thinks a company needs breathing room, what he calls a monopoly, to really focus on those 0 to 1 ideas.
So instead of battling it out in a packed market, he's saying find that unique space where you can kind of, I don't know, dominate, at least for a bit, and use that position to push the limits, like the Wright brothers with their flying machine.
Exactly. For a while, they were the only ones, right? Thiel believes that creating that kind of space, not necessarily a literal monopoly, but a strong position that lets companies think long-term and invest in those 0 to 1 innovations that could redefine a whole industry, maybe even create a new one.
I see. It's making sense, but I can already hear some people saying, hold on, isn't that just promoting monopolies? Which, most people see as a bad thing.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. We have to remember Thiel's not saying, crush your competition with shady tactics. He's saying that companies that make those 0 to 1 breakthroughs, they often end up dominating their market because of that innovation, not because they set out to create a monopoly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Think of Google or Amazon. They weren't trying to squash everyone else. They just built things so good that they became the big players.
Right, right. So it sounds like 0 to 1 thinking is as much about finding those unique opportunities, those untapped markets, as it is about the actual innovation.
Absolutely. It's finding those spaces where you can make something new and valuable and where you can build a strong, solid position in that market.
Gotcha. So we've got the basics of 0 to 1 down, but I'm really curious how all this trivia about Peter Thiel's life ties in. You mentioned it gives us some insight into his worldview. Where do we even start?
Well, one of the most interesting tidbits is that Thiel was a chess prodigy. He was a national master when he was pretty young. And honestly, I think understanding his chess background is key to understanding his whole approach to business and innovation.
He was a chess master. That's amazing. But I gotta ask, what's that got to do with his business philosophy? I don't quite see the connection.
Well, chess is all about strategy, right?
Yeah.
Thinking many moves ahead and knowing what your opponent might do. It's about bold, unexpected moves to get an advantage. And those are qualities that totally show up in Thiel's way of doing business. He's not just reacting to the market. He's thinking long term, you know, playing the long game.
I see. So his chess background might explain why he focuses on long-term vision and strategy rather than just, reacting to the competition and going for quick wins. He's not just trying to win the next move. He's thinking about the end game.
Exactly. And this long-term vision plays into his whole idea of definite optimism, which we'll dig into later. It's this belief that the future isn't just happening to us. We can shape it by what we do. That we can make a better future by setting these big, ambitious goals, not just tiny improvements here and there.
Wow, yeah, I'm starting to see how it all connects. So we've got this chess master who thinks strategically. He believes in long-term vision and these groundbreaking innovations, not just incremental change. What else can we learn about Thiel from this trivia?
Well, there's this interesting thing about the Stanford Review, too. He co-founded this, conservative student newspaper that was known for, going against the liberal grain on campus.
Ah, so it wasn't just the usual college paper with, fluff pieces about events and stuff. Sounds like Thiel was already, I don't know, kind of showing he liked to challenge the norm.
Exactly. And I think that just reinforces what we were talking about, right? Like, he's willing to challenge conventional wisdom, whether it's in school or in the business world. He's not afraid to, like, shake things up and question the way things are, even if it makes people uncomfortable.
That makes me wonder if that independent streak, that willingness to question things, is part of what led him to co-found PayPal. I mean, back then, the idea of sending money online was kind of crazy, right?
Totally. The late 90s, the internet was still this new thing, and e-commerce was just getting started.
Yeah.
Trying to convince people to trust their money to this, online system was a huge hurdle. But Thiel saw the potential for PayPal to totally change how we think about money and transactions.
And he was right. PayPal did kind of change the world in a lot of ways. So we've got this picture of Thiel, the chess player, the contrarian, the tech visionary. Do these traits tie into his 0 to 1 philosophy and the advice he gives in the book?
They totally do.
Yeah.
And these trivia questions you sent really highlight some key takeaways. Like, one of the most memorable things from 0 to 1 is build a monopoly and maintain it. It might sound harsh at first, but when you get his whole philosophy, it makes more sense.
Yeah, at first glance, it does sound like something a Bond villain would say. But you're saying it's more nuanced than that.
Exactly. It's not about, being ruthless or screwing over your competition.
Yeah.
Remember, Thiel believes that companies that are truly innovative will naturally rise to the top because they're making something new and valuable,
Right.
something that actually solves a problem. His advice is about understanding the power of having that strong market position and using it to keep innovating and pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
So it's not about being a monopoly in the traditional bad way, but about making something so good that it kind of naturally puts you in a leading position, like Google did with their search engine. I mean, it wasn't the first, but it was so much better than everything else that it became like what everyone uses. And that dominance let them do even more, branch out into other stuff.
Perfect example. Another key takeaway, and this one's interesting, is Thiel's skepticism about the lean startup approach. He's pretty critical of that whole idea of launching something and just iterating based on user feedback.
That's interesting. Lean startup is so popular these days. What's Thiel's problem with it?
He thinks while lean startup might work for small improvements, it doesn't really work for 0 to 1 innovations, the kind that need a big long-term vision. He says companies that make these huge breakthroughs have a clear plan, a big vision right from the start. They're not just throwing things out there to see what sticks. They're building toward a specific, ambitious goal.
So it's more about having a solid plan, knowing where you're going, instead of constantly shifting based on like short-term trends or user feedback.
Exactly. And this goes back to his chess background and definite optimism, which we talked about. Thiel believes we should approach the future with, like, a sense of optimism and control. Like, we can shape it. But it's not blind optimism. It's definite optimism based on a clear plan, a long-term vision, and this belief that we can achieve big goals through focused effort and execution.
Okay, this is all starting to make a lot of sense, but what about the power law mentioned in the trivia? It sounds cool, but kind of hard to get. Can you explain it?
The power law is this principle that applies to, like, a lot of things, including business. It basically says that results aren't evenly distributed. So for startups, it means a tiny handful of companies get most of the rewards, while most others, they just achieve a little bit or even fail. Thiel says this uneven distribution is because of, well, lots of things, like timing, how well things are done, even a little bit of luck. But the takeaway is that even small differences in strategy or decisions can have a huge impact on the outcome.
So it's not just about having a great idea, it's about making the right moves at the right time and taking advantage of those crucial moments that can like make or break a company.
Precisely. And this power law idea just reinforces how important it is to make bold, decisive moves and not be afraid to take risks, but calculated ones, of course. He thinks too many entrepreneurs get stuck overthinking things or trying to please everybody, and then they miss opportunities. He says figure out those key moments where a strategic decision could have a big impact and then go all in.
It's almost like playing poker. You can analyze the odds, figure out the risks, but you got to be willing to put your money down and see what happens.
Great analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And just like poker, the key is knowing when to, hold them and when to fold them. Sometimes the best move is to walk away, even if you've already put time and effort in.
I'm with you. Okay, I think we're starting to really understand Thiel's main ideas. But the trivia also brings up some of his more, I don't know, controversial views, like his belief that technological progress has slowed down. Isn't that a little pessimistic, especially for someone who's so into tech?
It might seem that way, but Thiel's argument is that we've become too afraid of risk, too focused on short-term wins. And that's led to a decline in truly groundbreaking innovation. He thinks we've gotten complacent, we've lost that ambition that drove earlier tech revolutions like the internet or the PC.
But haven't there been like incredible advancements in things like AI and biotech lately?
Totally, and Thiel acknowledges that. But his point is, we haven't seen anything on the level of those huge transformative technologies that really reshape society. He thinks we could achieve even bigger breakthroughs, but we need to get back that spirit of experimentation, that willingness to really go for it.
So it's not that tech progress has stopped, it's that we've become more, I don't know, incremental in our thinking,
Mhm.
less willing to take those big, crazy swings that could lead to really game-changing innovation.
Exactly. And I think this perspective is especially relevant for anyone working in a field that's, ripe for disruption, or anyone who wants to create something truly new and impactful. It's hard to step outside that comfort zone and embrace that 0 to 1 thinking.
Speaking of controversial, there's another quote from the excerpts. Every moment in business history only happens once. What's your take on that?
That one really makes you think. I think what Thiel's getting at is that there are these unique windows of opportunity, moments where everything's just right for a certain type of innovation or disruption to happen.
So it's not just about having a great idea, it's about recognizing those moments and having the foresight and guts to jump on them. Like being in the right place at the right time, but with a good dose of calculated risk-taking thrown in.
Exactly. And I think that's a powerful message for anyone who wants to make a difference, whether it's starting a business, leading a team, or even just pursuing something creative. It's about knowing that those 0 to 1 moments are rare and having the courage to grab them when they do come along.
It really highlights how important it is to be aware of the big trends and shifts that are happening all around us, right?
Absolutely. And I think Thiel's own journey proves that. He's gone from chess whiz to successful entrepreneur to venture capitalist and now best-selling author. He's always evolving, adapting to the changes, always on the lookout for those new opportunities to make something innovative and impactful.
It's like he's playing chess on a huge scale, always thinking many moves ahead, anticipating the next big shift.
Great analogy. It shows how important it is to have that long-term vision and that willingness to take smart risks.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. We explored 0 to 1,
Mhm.
delved into Peter Thiel's background, and unpacked some of his most, well, thought-provoking and sometimes controversial ideas. But what does it all mean for us, the listeners? I mean, we're not all chess masters or tech giants. How can we use these 0 to 1 principles in our own lives and careers?
That's the big question, right? How do we take these big ideas and make them work for us?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think one of the most important things about 0 to 1 is that it encourages us to look for those unique opportunities in our own fields, our own interests. It's about pushing ourselves to think bigger, bolder, and not be afraid to try something different, something off the beaten path.
So instead of just like trying to climb the ladder or follow the crowd, we should be looking for those uncharted areas where we can create something new, something that matters.
Exactly. It's about finding those niches where we can make our mark, build something that stands out. It could be starting a business, a new product, maybe even just looking at your current job
Hmm.
with a fresh perspective. Being willing to challenge how things are done.
That sounds exciting, but kind of scary too. How do we even find those 0 to 1 opportunities? They're not just like sitting around waiting for us.
True. It takes some, curiosity, creativity, and a willingness to see beyond the obvious.
Yeah.
But I think a good first step is to ask yourself some basic questions, like, what problems are people facing in your industry? What needs aren't being met? What trends are emerging that you could maybe jump on?
So it's about looking for those gaps in the market where there's a real need for something new.
Exactly. And it's about challenging how things have always been done. Remember Thiel in the Stanford Review?
Hmm.
He wasn't afraid to go against the grain, offer a different viewpoint. That same way of thinking can be so valuable when you're looking for those 0 to 1 opportunities.
It's like putting on a different pair of glasses, seeing the world in a new way.
I like that. And once we start looking at things with that 0 to 1 mindset, the opportunities will start popping up. But it's not enough to just see them. We got to have the courage to go after them.
That's the hard part. Having a good idea is one thing, but actually doing something about it is a whole other ballgame.
For sure. And that's where Thiel's definite optimism comes in. It's about believing that we can actually shape the future and not letting fear get in the way. It's about knowing that we can achieve those big goals if we're willing to work for them and make tough decisions.
It's like being that chess master again, right? Thinking ahead and having the confidence to make those strategic moves.
You got it. But remember, even the best chess players don't always win. Failure happens, especially when you're trying to do something really groundbreaking. But it's how we learn from those failures that really matters. That's what helps us grow and, get better.
So it's not about avoiding failure completely, it's about seeing it as a chance to learn, to improve our approach, to become more resilient.
Yeah, I like that way of putting it, and I think that's a really valuable lesson from 0 to 1. It's not just a business or tech book, it's a way of thinking about life, about approaching things with purpose, ambition, and this belief that we can actually make a difference.
It's pretty inspiring. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one last piece of advice for our listeners? Those who are ready to embrace this 0 to 1 mindset and really make their mark.
I would say don't be afraid to dream big. Think outside the box. Challenge the way things are. The world is full of opportunities, but you got to be willing to see them and go after them. And remember, every journey starts with one step. So what's that one small step you can take today to get closer to your 0 to 1 goal? Write it down, make a plan, and start taking action. The future's waiting to be built.
Love it. That's a great point to end on. So, listeners, we want to hear from you. What's your 0 to 1 idea? What's that bold step you're going to take? Share it with us on social media with hashtag #DeepDive0to1.
And until next time, keep diving deep. And remember, you have the power to create your own future.